Welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
This time, we're going to be looking at Venture Global.
Okay.
They're a newcomer to the liquefied natural gas scene, or LNG.
Right.
You gave us a ton of information on them.
I did.
And you want to know if they're a good investment?
Yeah, I mean, are they a diamond in the rough,
Right.
or are they just a lump of coal?
Well, we're going to be going through all of this stuff that you gave us, articles, financial reports, presentations, the whole 9 yards.
All of it.
We're going to distill it down to the most important stuff and figure out if Venture Global is a buy or not.
We're going to use the lens of value investing to determine that.
That's right.
We'll be looking at their business model, their management team, their financials, and even what the market thinks about them.
And all this stuff, by the way, will be available in the episode description.
Absolutely.
So, okay, let's jump right in.
Okay.
What does Venture Global actually do? What's their story?
Venture Global operates across the entire LNG supply chain, from producing natural gas to transporting and even regasifying it.
Now, regasification, that's turning it back into gas, right?
Exactly. It's the process of converting LNG back into its gaseous state.
Okay.
But their bread and butter is exporting LNG, particularly overseas. They source natural gas from North America, they liquefy it, and then ship it out.
That sounds pretty straightforward, but isn't the LNG market already kind of dominated by big players?
It is.
So how does Venture Global, differentiate themselves? How do they stand out?
Venture Global actually has a very interesting and unique approach.
Right.
They utilize a modular construction method for building their facilities.
Okay.
And they claim that it is significantly cheaper and faster than the traditional methods.
What does that mean, modular construction?
So instead of building these massive customized plants, they use prefabricated modules, kind of like giant Lego blocks for LNG plants.
Oh, wow, like Lego blocks for LNG plants.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's the idea.
Okay, but how does that translate into an advantage in the market? How does that help them?
Well, they claim that this modular approach helps them achieve lower production costs.
Okay.
Which means they can offer more competitive pricing for their LNG.
Right, because, in any commodity-driven industry, price is king.
Absolutely. Price is a huge factor.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they can also build facilities much faster.
Okay.
Which means that they can react to market opportunities more quickly.
So speed and cost efficiency are their two weapons.
That's how they're trying to differentiate themselves.
Okay, so they've got a really interesting business model, but what about the people at the helm?
Yeah.
Is Venture Global's management team capable of steering the ship?
That's always a critical question for investors to ask.
Yeah.
And Venture Global CEO Mike Sable seems to have a strong track record of execution.
Okay.
He led the completion of their Calcasieu Pass facility in record time.
Wow.
Even navigating hurdles like hurricanes and the pandemic.
So they were building during the pandemic?
Yes, they were, and during hurricane season.
That's wild.
It is quite impressive.
So that really speaks to their operational capabilities. But are there any red flags when it comes to management?
Well, their ability to execute quickly is impressive, but it's also raised some concerns. There have been environmental complaints regarding their operations, suggesting that they might be cutting corners to achieve those fast turnaround times.
Okay.
And they've also been involved in some legal disputes with major clients like Shell and BP over delayed contracts.
Oh, wow. So it's interesting that they're able to build so fast, but it sounds like it might be coming at a cost.
Potentially, yeah.
Both environmentally and in terms of relationships with key clients.
Right.
So that definitely raises some questions about their long-term sustainability and their ethical considerations.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on and talk about money.
Sure.
How's their financial health looking? Are they a safe bet, or are there some warning signs?
Well, the financials are a bit of a mixed bag. They've got strong revenue growth. They reached almost $8 billion in revenue in 2023.
Wow.
But their earnings can be quite volatile.
Why is that?
Because they rely heavily on spot market sales.
Okay.
Which means they're exposed to the fluctuations in LNG prices.
Yeah.
It's like riding a roller coaster.
Oh, so they're at the whims of the market.
Yeah, it's exciting, but you never know which direction you're headed next. And
we can't forget about all the debt that they've taken on to finance their rapid expansion.
Yeah.
That's got to be a concern.
Absolutely. Their debt-to-equity ratio is quite high.
Okay.
Which essentially means they have a lot of debt compared to their assets. And this, coupled with the fact that they currently have negative free cash flow,
Okay.
paints a somewhat worrying financial picture.
Now, free cash flow, just so everyone knows,
Right.
is the cash a company has left over after paying for its operating expenses and capital expenditures.
Exactly.
So if it's negative, it means they're spending more than they're bringing in.
That's right.
So their financials are a little bit of a puzzle then.
Yeah.
Strong revenue growth.
Yes.
But a heavy debt burden.
Yeah.
And negative free cash flow.
Right. A lot to consider there.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there.
Definitely. It is a lot to think about. So we've seen that Venture Global has this interesting business model and some financials that are kind of all over the place.
Right.
But what about the market's perception of them? Are investors buying into their story?
Yeah, are they the hot new stock, or are people a little bit hesitant?
Well, to be honest, it hasn't been the smoothest ride.
Okay.
Their initial public offering, their IPO back in 2021, was kind of a flop.
Oh, really?
Yeah, their stock price has dropped quite a bit since then, which suggests that investors are maybe a little bit wary.
So they're not exactly a Wall Street darling at the moment.
Not at the moment.
Why do you think that is? What are some of the reasons for that hesitation?
Well, one concern is the possibility of an oversupply in the LNG market.
Yeah.
There are a lot of companies jumping into this industry. And if supply outpaces demand, it could put downward pressure on prices, and that would squeeze everyone's margins.
So investors might be worried that the LNG party's getting a bit crowded.
Potentially, yeah.
That makes sense. Now, you mentioned earlier that Venture Global's ownership structure is a little bit unique.
It is.
Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Absolutely. Their ownership is highly concentrated,
Right.
which means that a small group of individuals, mainly the founders, hold the vast majority of the shares.
And they also have these special shares that give them extra voting power, right?
You're exactly right. They have what are called super voting shares.
Oh, okay.
And that gives them disproportionate control over the company's decisions.
So even if you buy stock in Venture Global, your influence is pretty limited.
Right. It's not as straightforward as owning stock in a company with a more typical ownership structure.
That's a pretty important consideration for investors who want to feel like they have a say
Exactly.
in the companies that they're invested in.
It raises questions about transparency and accountability.
Okay, so we've talked about their business model, their management, their financials, the market's perception of them, and this unusual ownership structure. It seems like there's a lot to unpack here.
There is.
Can we try to summarize everything and assess the overall risk involved?
Absolutely. I think a SWOT analysis would be a really helpful tool in this situation.
Okay, great. What is a SWOT analysis?
It stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats.
Okay.
It allows us to look at a company from all angles in a very structured way.
So it's kind of like a cheat sheet for investors.
That's a great way to put it.
Let's start with the positives. What are Venture Global's strengths?
Their main strength is definitely their low-cost production model.
Right.
Thanks to that modular construction method we talked about.
Right, those Lego blocks.
Exactly.
They're really banking on that.
It allows them to offer competitive pricing, which is crucial in this market.
Yeah, for sure. What else would you consider a strength?
Well, they've managed to secure partnerships with some really big players in the energy industry, like Shell and BP.
Even with the legal issues.
Yeah, despite some legal hiccups, those partnerships signal that those major companies still see value in working with Venture Global.
Okay, interesting. So those big companies aren't shying away from them.
That's right.
What about their management team?
Yeah, we shouldn't overlook the fact that their management team, while maybe not perfect, has demonstrated that they can execute complex projects quickly and efficiently.
So they can get things done.
They can.
Even in challenging situations like a pandemic.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got the low-cost model, the partnerships, the capable management team. Now let's flip the coin.
Yeah.
What are some of Venture Global's weaknesses?
One of their biggest weaknesses is definitely their reliance on volatile natural gas prices.
Okay.
Their earnings are heavily influenced by those price swings, which makes them inherently risky.
So if prices drop, their profitability could take a hit.
Exactly.
So what else?
Another weakness is their geographic concentration.
Okay.
They primarily operate on the U.S. Gulf Coast.
Which limits their options and exposes them to regional risks like hurricanes.
Right, they're building during hurricane season.
Exactly.
That's a risk.
And of course, we can't forget about that mountain of debt they're carrying.
Right, that debt-to-equity ratio.
Exactly.
That could come back to bite them.
It could.
Okay, so weaknesses. We've got the volatile natural gas prices, the geographic concentration, and that mountain of debt.
That's right.
Now, let's shift gears again and talk about opportunities. What are some potential avenues for growth and success for Venture Global?
Well, the global demand for LNG is expected to continue growing rapidly,
Okay.
especially as countries look for alternatives to coal.
So even with more competition, the market itself is an opportunity.
The market is huge.
What else?
They could explore expanding their operations beyond the U.S. Gulf Coast,
Okay.
diversifying their footprint a little bit and tapping into new markets.
So kind of mitigating that geographic risk.
Yeah. All right, last but not least, let's talk about threats.
Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges and risks that Venture Global faces?
Well, as we said earlier, the LNG market is becoming increasingly competitive.
Right, a crowded party?
A lot of people at the party,
Yeah.
which could lead to an oversupply and put pressure on prices.
What else? What are some other threats?
The global shift towards renewable energy sources,
Okay.
that poses a long-term threat to the entire fossil fuel industry,
Of course.
including natural gas.
Right.
So as the world transitions to a more sustainable energy mix, demand for LNG could eventually decline.
They're kind of in a rapidly evolving industry
They are.
with an uncertain future.
It's a lot to consider.
It is a lot for investors to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've covered a lot of ground here with Venture Global.
We have.
I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear your final verdict.
I'm sure they are.
But before we do that, why don't we take a quick break to gather our thoughts?
Okay.
And we'll come back with a clear conclusion.
Sounds.
Okay, so we're back. And, the big question is on everyone's mind, is Venture Global a buy or is it a sell?
Well, it really depends.
Okay.
For value investors, it's a bit of a tough one. There's definitely potential.
Yeah, like that low-cost production model, it's pretty attractive.
It is, and the demand for LNG globally is undeniable. But those red flags, we talked about the debt, the legal issues, and especially that super voting stock structure, those are pretty big concerns.
So not a screaming buy then?
They need to prove that they can handle that debt, clean up their act environmentally, and we need to see how they navigate this increasingly competitive landscape.
And even then, that ownership structure, that might just be a deal breaker for a lot of people. It's like,
Yeah.
Joining a book club where you never get to choose the book.
That's a great way to put it. You want to feel like you have at least some say in the companies you invest in. And with Venture Global, that's not really a guarantee. And in the meantime, if you want to learn more about how to analyze companies like Venture Global and really dive into value investing, I highly recommend checking out the Stock Analytics AI YouTube channel.
Yeah, we've got tons of videos breaking down those concepts in a really clear and easy to understand way. The link is in the episode description. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future deep dives.
Absolutely. And remember, everything we discussed today is just for informational purposes only. It's not financial advice. Always do your own research before making any investment decisions.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into Venture Global. Until next time, happy investing.